Okay, we're going to talk about the dirty details of 7-Eleven Dissolution. Yeah, all right. So I told you we're going to talk about 14 pages of material in this video. What is left to say about Dissolution? Why could I just not leave it as a little bitty round-shaped beaker with 900 mils of stuff in it that we drop a tablet in and call it a day? I mean, that would be such an easy A on an assignment. But you know me, that's not how this goes. And that's because that is not how the USPNF or other pharmacopoeia methods will actually do the dissolution testing. There's devil in the details. That's what I keep saying about the class. Details matter, folks, and those are the details that we're going to have to focus on in this video and maybe the next, and maybe the next, maybe the next, maybe the next. Oh, I'll just keep that a secret. All right, so next up, we already mentioned this in the last video, but the dissolution test for 7-Eleven, because that's what we're going to focus on right now, is just 7-Eleven for prescription medications and for over-the-counter drugs, not dietary supplements. 7-Eleven dissolution is mainly used for oral doses only. We've already talked about that, and that's something that I'm going to say again. Don't let that trick you on a question in a quiz or on a test or on a final exam, okay? Because I should just go ahead and give you an automatic F if you allow that to trick you. Because I'm telling you point blank, it's probably going to be on there. Dose is what they refer to as one tablet or one capsule. So that's something that I don't think that I have to say, but I do it anyway because I never take assumptions, maybe. And that's what quality control tells me. Never take assumptions. And I'm quality controlling the class because I'm making sure that I don't make any assumptions because you might not know what one dose means. So one dose is one tablet or one capsule. Next is the enteric coated. We saw that in that original paragraph that I read verbatim in the last video. And here is a picture, and this picture is just good old-fashioned aspirin. It's like a miracle drug. 325 milligrams of API, active pharmaceutical ingredient, probably a definition that you're probably going to have to know. So active pharmaceutical ingredient would be aspirin, because that's what makes this thing aspirin. It's also called acetylsalicylic acid, by the way. But if I take a look at the label up here at the very top, enteric coated. So what is basically this specially coated tablet, and why do we see those out there, and what's the big deal with them? All right, so these particular types of medications, if you see that word, is a delayed release form of a solid dose. So what's happening here is that some people have very sensitive stomachs, and those sensitive stomachs can sometimes not handle drugs that are going to break down and be even more acidic because it gives them acid reflux, it gives them some heartburns, it messes with their tummies, maybe some internal bleeding if I'm unlucky. So these are things that we want to kind of stay away from if that is a thing with my body. So what they do is that they specially coat sometimes these drugs with a protective coating. So that way it does not necessarily break down in the stomach, but it actually starts to break down more after it passes the stomach, which means into your intestinal tract. So these are great for people that do have those sensitive tummies that have to watch out for that. And that is a word that they will look for because that means it's going to break down later after it passes the stomach. So if that is a thing, and if we see that, and if that is the intention of the dose, then we have to make sure that we follow the proper dissolution protocol, because that dissolution protocol could be different than a typical run-of-the-mill capsule or tablet. So these are words that we have to look out for, and the intention of the dose is very important. Next up, we have some tablets that are covered in gelatin. All right, these are gelatin coated capsules or tablets maybe. And gelatin is great for many purposes. They use them for many purposes. But the problem, and that's what I'm going to focus on right now, the problem of gelatin is that over time, depending on how these are manufactured, depending on how they're made, depending on how long they've sat, the gelatin can actually form a harder shell around the solid dose form. And that harder shell could maybe fail a dissolution test, a DISO test. Maybe the tablet itself would pass, but the gelatin has prevented it from breaking apart and releasing that active ingredient like it should. So gelatin coated dosages are actually problematic for us. So there's going to be a way that we handle these gelatin coated tablets or capsules. It's a little unique. It is not the general run-of-the-mill tablet that is just hard-pressed and formed into a pellet. There's something else extra that these tablets are bringing to the table, and therefore there's something else extra that we have to do in the dissolution systems. So these cross-linkings, I want you to think of the gelatin as like, oh, look, let's hold hands. All these little molecules are just like, yay, we're one big kumbaya. And then we're going to hold these hands and we're going to create this network, and this network is going to be cross-linked. So that way everybody holds each other's hands and arms, and it's really hard to break us apart because, you know, it's strength in numbers. And that's kind of what goes on here with these gelatin tablets or tablets. So what the USP/NF actually recommends is they will tell you to try dissolution first, right? Try the regular run-of-the-mill dissolution test. And if that does not pass, if that does not work, and you think that it's because of the gelatin coating that's around it, then there's extra things that we do, and we don't necessarily fail it, but we do some extra steps in the process of dissolution, and we try it again. And down below, that's what you're going to see. It's going to be extra additives. We've got to have something that will break down the gelatin, and we've got to have something that will kind of help loosen this structure if the cross-linking is a problem for us. And there are 3 forms of what I'm going to see here, and the first one is pepsin. Pepsin is an enzyme. All of these are actually enzymes in some form or fashion. But this enzyme has a special purpose, and this enzyme works great that is a pH level lower than 4. If I have a water solution, and that water is pH of 6 or pH of 7, this is not going to work. It's not going to be appropriate. If I have a buffer solution and that buffer is a pH of 7.2, this is not going to work. It's not appropriate for that either. So pepsin really should only be used in acidic conditions and preferably pH of 4 or less. So what will happen is that pepsin is very activated in these pH levels, and it can go in and that can help break up these cross-links in some form or fashion and maybe help the gelatin not be a problem anymore. We are really focused on the tablet, and we're really focused on how the tablet breaks up or the capsule breaks up. And the gelatin is going to come in contact with other things that's inside of our stomach and our digestive tract. So yeah, it's more than just what we're putting into the medium. What we're putting into the medium in the laboratory is going to be okay for that purpose. But you have to keep in mind, these tablets actually do see other things. And if the gelatin is a problem, then we need to replicate more like what it's going to see when we swallow them and put them into our stomach and into our intestinal tract. And part of this could be pepsin, and that is going to work great with pHs of 4 or lower. The next one is papan. Okay, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that is going to work with pH levels 4 to 6.8. So still slightly acidic, but we're now venturing into the neutral area, not quite, but into the more neutral area of the pH. So this works great for those purposes. And of course, this would not be necessarily found too much in the stomach because your stomach is highly acidic. After it goes past your stomach, your pH levels begin to change in your body. And that's where some of these pH ranges are coming from. But 4 to 6.8 is papon. And then pH greater than 6.8, we are going to look at pancretin. There's different ways. Tomato. I mean, come on, folks, right? But it's still an enzyme. This enzyme is going to work really well in more basic alkaline conditions. It's going to help break apart maybe the gelatin in a different way, or some of those cross-linkings in a different way. Those are our three choices. Up until, I would say, a handful of years ago, it was really just two choices here, and that was the pepsin with pH lower than 4. But they were also like, well, you know, it actually does have some activity greater than 4, and we'll push the boundaries, and we'll go a little bit up on the pH scale, and we'll still kind of get by with pepsin. And then papan came around, or papain, Jacques Pepin. Oh, by the way, Jacques Pepin, don't get confused, because this is Jacques Pepin. You know, if you don't know who that is, then just YouTube him, you'll find them. He'll make you a great grilled cheese. So if I take a look at these three choices, there are now 3. The middle one actually comes from papaya. It's kind of neat how they extract that enzyme and how they convert that into some type of reagent that we would use in a lab. And I'll show you a quick little video of that when we get to that point. But here are our 3 different versions of an enzyme that we would add to these mediums, if that's a thing. Here is 2 versions of what we would call gelatin coated. A lot of times these do happen with the capsule types of formulations, and the capsules are going to be coated in this layer of gelatin. Think of Jello, like lab Jello, gelatin kind of. And these capsules that you're seeing on the screen, the left-hand one is going to be doxycycline, and the right-hand one is gabapentin. So the doxycycline is typically an antibiotic. It falls into the realm of the tetracyclines, and tetracyclines were, very many years ago, these tetracycline families were given to people from bacterial infections all the way to people who experienced acne and had a really bad case of it. The gabapentins are typically prescribed for some type of pain or some type of chill out moment. So that way you can load up on some GABAs, and then you just kind of crawl into the bed and you just pass out, and you don't really feel pain at all. And you're very happy and you're very easygoing. And you're probably thinking, I need some GABAs right now to put me out of my misery of the 115 class. But it also probably makes you think second about that little TV show called Gabba Gabba, or whatever it was called. Oh, who would have known? So let's talk about the gelatin. This is what you would see. If you knew that you had a problem with the gelatin coating on some tablets or capsules, this is what you would see happen. It looks like it's just a big old blob, right? And if you see these big old blobs that are happening in the baskets or at the bottom of these kind of paddle apparatuses, then that means that the gelatin really isn't doing what it should be doing, and it has cross-linked, and it is forming a stronger bond with itself, and it's a little bit harder to break that apart. So that way the actual inside under layer of that gelatin can do what it needs to do. So once more, always a problem. It always has been, and there's ways that we can fix some of those gelatin issues in a dissolution system. So if you go through the USPNF 711, what you're going to find is for dosage forms containing or coated with gelatin, this is what you need to do. It says, if the dosage form containing gelatin does not meet the criteria under the acceptance table, blah, 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 because of the evidence of the cross-linking that you can visually see, and I just showed you that picture of what that can look like. It says the dissolution should be repeated, and you should add an enzyme to the medium that's stated within the monograph. So this is not just only enzyme, but it is the medium that they have told you to use in the first place that you've already used through the first round. But now we're going to add something to it, and those are going to be one of the 3 enzymes based on the pH level of that medium. Next, it says, as described below, and the dissolution results should be evaluated starting at the first stage of the appropriate table. It is not necessary to continue testing through the 24 units when criteria are not met during the first stage of testing, and the evidence of cross-linking is observed. So it's almost like they're saying, listen, if you did that first round of the dissolution test and you saw things that are happening like this, and you have determined that it is a problem with the gelatin, then you just need to hit the reset button, the big green red reset button, and you just need to start all over. So then when you start all over and you add the enzyme to it, it's almost like you're starting fresh at that moment. So pepsin is going to be the first, and pepsin, again, is in the acidic level. Pepsin does a really good job breaking down proteins into smaller peptides and amino acids. So what I want you to think of as a protein I want you to think is just a blah, 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 big old blob. And what happens with these proteins is that under the right conditions and under the right circumstances, the blah, 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 blob of protein can straighten out into a big long train. And this is stretching and unkinking the finely, tautly wound protein that might be there. And then what's going to happen is that the pepsin is like Pac-Man. So it's going to go through and chomp, 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 chomp. And when it chomps, it's breaking this protein up into smaller, what we call peptides, or into the little individual little pellets that Pac-Man eats up. And those individual pellets that Pac-Man eats up is called an amino acid. So that is the role of pepsin. Your body kind of uses pepsin in some form or fashion, and it will help break down proteins in the foodstuffs that you are eating. And it takes these proteins and it really just straightens them out under the right pH levels, and then it begins to break those down, and it will break them down into bigger chunks called the peptides, and then even smaller chunks from that, and that will be the amino acids that make up the smaller peptides, and those peptides make up the entire protein globular after that. So main digestive enzymes of humans and other animals, we're not the only ones that's got it, but this definitely is going to be a test question. And when I say that, the test question means draw this structure. That's what I want you to do. So on Canvas or on an online platform or on a final exam, make sure that you memorize that structure as it is drawn right there, because you're going to have to do it. And this is how I want you to answer it. Draw the structure of pepsin, and I want you to go blah, 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 blah. That's what I want you to do. All right. So most active in pH 1.5 to 2.5. So very acidic. And again, stomach kind of holds that pH level there. Inactive above 6.5. So after 6.5, it's just not going to do anything. So that means in the dissolution test of 7-Eleven, we should not be using pepsin at all if we are running a buffer or medium that is 6.5 or greater, because this is not going to do anything for us at all. Extracted from hog stomachs, that's where we get most of this stuff. Great to curdle milk, great to make cheese. They mix it in with soy protein to make it a little bit fluffier and whippier. Gelatin, hot cereals, you're going to find this stuff everywhere. And just know that when you eat those food things, you are eating them because they have been made from the inside of hog stomachs, because that's where we end up getting this thing most of the time, especially in the food arena. Here's a stability graph of pH and activity of the pepsin. So what you're seeing is that in the very low levels here, percentage skyrockets up, and it skyrockets up to about 1.5 or close to 2. And then after that, the activity begins to go down. And then about pH of 4, we start to see a cliff and a drop off that begins to happen. So at 6.5, absolutely nothing's going to go on. At 6, really, you're pushing the limits already, because very little is going to go on at all. And then even at pH of 5, you are on the cliff. So you have dove off the cliff and you are plummeting down already at pH of 5s. So pH of 4s or lower, really, really good for this particular dissolution system. And that's what you're seeing here suggested in 7-Eleven. It's saying, listen, if gelatin's the problem and your medium is pH of 4 or less, then that is really great news for you, because pepsin can be used in your medium to help break up that gelatin and do what it needs to do. Allow that solid dose to perform the way it needs to perform. And that is why, because after 4, you're starting to see a massive drop-off in the enzyme activity, and it's just not going to work for us. Next up is papain or papan. The papain is going to come from the papaya. And the papaya, if you think of a papaya growing on a tree, and the papaya is there and it's nice and green, then you can take something like just a sharp bladed knife, and you can score the outside of the papaya, and it produces this like white, milky looking substance. And that is the papain or papan. So the papain is just going to be this milky white substance that's going to leak from the fruit, and then very often they just put something underneath the fruit and they catch all of this milky liquid that seeps from that particular fruit off of a tree. They call it latex from the fruit of the papaya tree, but that's really what it looks like. It's like a white, milky looking substance that just seeps out from the fruit, and they can do this about 2 or 3 times before that fruit just really doesn't produce anymore, or at least enough of it in order to go through the trouble of scoring them and collecting that white milky liquid all over again. They use this in pretty much everything. So not only in dissolution, but very commonly seen in meat tendilizers, toothpaste, because over time, a long extended time, they believe that it does make your teeth a little bit whiter. Creams to remove dead tissues. So if you've got some kind of injury on your skin, you can put like this ointment or this cream onto the surface of that. All of that dead tissue will be eaten away, and it's due to this enzyme that kind of helps that particular types of creams or ointments to work. And it can also interfere with cannabinoid testing in urine. So that basically means that all of these like little drug trickers, you know, if you're going around smoking some marijuana or some joints, and you're like, oh God, I got a urine pee test tomorrow and I completely forgot about it. And then people go rushing to Walmart or to Target to buy these things that are supposed to help you trick or beat the urine test. A lot of times in those particular types of products, you're going to find papain that's going to be listed there. And that enzyme does have a tendency to help trick or interfere with the cannabinoids that are inside of your system and probably coming out through your urine. And sometimes it doesn't make the test show it positive at all. So I got a short video on extracting this milk of the papaya and really how that corresponds to our product and our reagents that we use in a laboratory setting. So who knew that you like papaya so much after all of those ingredients that are used for very common consumer products? So again, Jacques Pepin, this is not the same thing, but go watch him on YouTube. He's great. And then next is going to be this pancreatin, or another kind of soup of enzymes that begin to happen here. And this directly comes from the pancreas, which is kind of how it gets its name. The pancreas does a couple of different jobs inside of your body, and they're very important. And yeah, this is a pancreas in this image that is not a turd. The pancreas submits these juices that help break down foodstuffs. And what's nice about the pancreas compared to something like the pepsin is that this really works on the basic side of the house. Not only that, but there's a little bit of charges that kind of happen here. The bicarbonates are all kind of in a basic environment. And this is going to be the ingredient or enzyme of choice if we have medium or buffers that are on the basic side of the house. So if I go back to the criteria that's inside of 711, it's going to say 6.8. So anything greater than 6.8, this is what we're going to grab. This is what we're going to be using. And very often these media are phosphate buffers. And phosphate buffers are going to be in the realm of 7.2, 7.4, 7.6 a lot of times. So out of the three choices, this is going to be the most common that we're going to be using if we have a gelatin type of problem that we are experiencing in the dissolution system. The pancreatin actually is also going to break down fats, not proteins. So it does a very good job to take these kind of triglycerides and it breaks them down into the individual units and it frees those up. So the mechanism here is a little bit different, but that's okay because, you know, we're at a different pH and there's going to be other things other than gelatin that's going to be there. And this doesn't only target fat molecules, but many other things. That's just one of them. Next up, if I take a look at the apparatuses. So now that we have moved on from this idea of a gelatin capsule or tablet and the problems that it can cause, there's two different dissolution systems that we begin to talk about in the 711 general chapter. By the way, before I go on and talk about these different apparatuses, I want to go back here because I said pancreatin, and some people would call this pancreatin. Okay, well, whatever. Again, tomato, tomato. Listen, folks, Appalachian at the heart right here. So my inner Appalachian comes out sometimes, and yes, it is Appalachian and not Appalachia. Ooh, I'm going to go to the Appalachian Mountains. Nobody knows where the Appalachian Mountains are. It's Appalachian. Take it from a local. All right, so apparatus 1 and apparatus 2. What exactly is apparatus 1 and apparatus 2? Because these are things that we're going to be talking about and these are things that we're going to be seeing in the monographs. So what are the differences? Oh, okay. So first off, apparatus number 1 is going to be used for baskets. So we've talked about the basket of a dissolution system. And instead of describing, oh, this is a basket, this is a basket, this is a basket, this is a basket, they're just going to put apparatus 1 because they're going to assume that you know what apparatus 1 stands for. And I'm going to assume that you know what apparatus 1 stands for because those are great quiz questions and test questions. All right, so let's take a look. Apparatus number 1. So if I do have gelatin coated, or if I do not have gelatin coated, doesn't matter. If I just have a tablet, solid dose, and I need to do a test on them, it's going to tell me apparatus 1 or apparatus 2, and apparatus 1 is basket. It says, the assembly consists of the following: a vessel, which may be covered and made of glass or other inert transparent material, a motor, a metallic drive shaft, and a cylindrical basket. The vessel is partially immersed in a suitable water bath of any convenient size or heated by a suitable device. The water bath or heating device permits holding the temperature inside of alert, 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 alert. Okay, that's an important number that's coming up, and it's 37 plus or minus 0.5. So when we do dissolutions, whatever kind of dosage form that we're going to get, when we do apparatus 1 or apparatus 2, those tests need to be done in a water bath, and that water bath needs to be 37 plus or minus 0.5. In addition to that, the medium that we put inside of that vessel should also be the same temperature of 37 plus or minus 0.5. I mean, after all, why go through the trouble of doing this big water bath that we are seeing down below that you saw in those pictures? They all get sunk down into like an aquarium tank looking thing. saying. So that aquarium tank has to be held at 37. Why are we controlling the temperature if we don't want the vessels to be at 37 as well? That doesn't make any sense. So they need to be the same. So vessel at 37 during the test, and keeps the bath fluid in constant smooth motion. No part of the assembly, including the environment in which the assembly is placed, contributes significant motion, agitation, or vibration. So in other words, I don't want to put the dissolution system on a table that's going to go rocking back and forth, right? Okay, put it on a sturdy countertop. An apparatus that permits observation of the specimen and of the stirring element during the test is going to be preferable. So they want this to mainly be made out of clear glass. They want you to be able to see through it so you can make observations. Not only the aquarium tank you should be able to see through, but the vessels that you are putting the solid doses in, those preferably also need to be see-through as well. The vessel is cylindrical with a hemispherical bottom and with one of the following dimensions. And it gives me a couple of choices. So there's some assortments of dissolution vessels that are out there depending on what I need. But this specifically is saying a liter, and then a 2 liter, and then a 4 liter. The sides are flanged at the top. A fitted axis of the vessel and rotates smoothly and without significant wobble that could affect the results. A speed regulating device is used that allows the shaft rotation speed to be selected. And we hope that that speed is going to be within the parameters of alert, 4%. In other words, what's going to happen here is that if I type in 50 RPMs, someone better test the dissolution system. Someone better make sure that this dissolution system is validated and that it is turning and heating at the proper temperatures. And there are things that allow us to calculate the rotations per minute. So that 50 RPM needs to be within plus or minus 4% of that value. Shaft and basket components of the stirring element are fabricated of stainless steel, type 316, or other inert material. Baskets having a gold coating may be used. What? A dosage unit is placed in a dry basket at the beginning of each test. And the distance between the inside bottom of the vessel and the bottom of the basket is maintained, alert, at 25 plus or minus 2 millimeters from the bottom. All right, so if you've had 114, we've talked about a few of these things already. We talked about the temperature being very important. It needs to be set at 37 plus or minus 0.5. We also talked about the height of the baskets or the height of the paddles. We use those little wooden balls in the laboratory to adjust the heights very quickly. Those wooden balls have diameters of 25 millimeters. So we drop those wooden balls down into the vessels. We lower our dissolution test or system until it rests on the wooden balls that we have placed inside of those vessels. We adjust the paddles or the basket heights according to that. All right. The only thing that we haven't really talked about is double checking the RPMs of the paddles or the baskets. Again, that would be a metrologist's job, but there are tools in place that we can use on these systems to double check how quickly it is turning and if it meets within that parameter. Based on the description of the vessels, this is what we're going to end up seeing. And folks, I've got a question here and it says universal. And the answer is, yeah, kinda, right? I mean, the USP&F tells us exactly how these things should be made. It tells us the dimensions, it tells us the widths, it tells us the heights, it tells us the volumes of 1s and 2s and 4s that can be used. But for the most part, the UFP is almost demanding a very universal design in a dissolution vessel. And this is what this ends up looking like. So does that mean, though, that a dissolution vessel from one manufacturer can be placed inside of another manufacturer and work? And the answer is yes, sometimes, but sometimes no. And the reason, it's not due to the vessel most of the time, it's actually due to the lips. This is where they begin to play little tricks. So for instance, the Agilent systems will very often have larger collars or larger lips on them in order to go into their dissolution systems and snap into place. Then if I take that dissolution vessel and place it into a different manufacturer like a Hansen system, the Hansen system might require this very thin lip on the dissolution vessels, where the Agilents maybe had a little bit thicker lip on them, and we can't secure them in place. And this is a little trick that manufacturers can do to make sure that you are ordering dissolution vessels from that instrumentation manufacturer and not somewhere else, or somewhere that's more universally designed. The ranges of these dissolution vessels are going to go anywhere between $300 to $600 in price point. And very often, a dissolution system will require 6 of these. So there is a chance that a dissolution system, just vessels alone, just the vessels alone that get inserted into the instrument, could run a total of $3,500 or $3,600 if you're on the higher price point of a typical dissolution vessel here. Because, again, it's going to take 6 of them, and 6 times 600 is going to be $3,600. So if you're unlucky, I hate to break the bank to you, might as well sell a kidney in order to get these dissolution vessels up and going. If these break, if these chip, if these crack, they do have to be replaced. So we want to make sure that we inspect these every time that we take them out, every time we rinse them, every time we clean them and put them back in. But there are third-party companies that are out there that will sell compatible dissolution vessels to these big instrumentation manufacturers and suppliers. So take a look for them, because they're out there and you can maybe find them a little bit cheaper. As far as the apparatus one goes, they're also going to show me in the USPNF a image of the basket. So keep in mind, apparatus number 1 is going to be a basket form. What you're seeing on the left-hand side in the picture is the basket itself. And on the inside of the basket, we have a tablet. And that tablet is going to be lowered. It's like a shark cage. It's going to lower that tablet down inside of the medium, whatever medium that might be, and it's going to start turning based on the RPM that you have set. And over a course of time, that tablet will break apart, and that API will leach out of the cage, and it will go into the medium, which is where we end up taking a sample at the very end. These baskets, just like the vessels, are also highly regulated and actually predetermined by the USPNF. I want you to look at this. This is a schematic of the basket. Ooh, the basket height have to be 37 plus or minus 3 millimeters. And then that's from the very, very tippity top to the very, very bottom. And then on the inside, this basket inner dimension needs to be 27 plus or minus 1 millimeter for the open screen area of the basket. Ooh. And then here up at the very top, this needs to have 3 tangs. And the 3 tangs are going to kind of, this is a tang, by the way. The 3 tangs are going to snap the basket into place and kind of hold it in position. So the retention spring with 3 tangs on 120 degree centers. Look at this mess, right? So because of this, baskets are somewhat universal as well. The basket that's used in one system is probably going to be the basket that's going to be used in all systems, because the USPNF requires these dimensions to be upheld. And the problem is, how does the basket get attached inside of the dissolution system? Sometimes they're universal, many times they are. Other times they're not, and that's simply because of the way that they are made to fit within the dissolution system. So if the manufacturer gets really clever and they want you to order baskets specifically from them, then they can make a slight modification in how these things fit up into the dissolution systems and secure themselves, So that way, when you need a future order, you'll always order from them and not a third party. But overall, the basket in general has very, very universal designs. And that is because the USPNF has made it that way because they want to ensure consistency depending on laboratory to laboratory. Everything from the height of the basket, the width of the basket, how the prongs or the tangs are included up here at the very top. Everything that goes on with the design, USP already has it in place. Next up is going to be apparatus number 2, and that is our paddle. And that's what we'll talk about in the next video. So come back. We're not yet over.